Well, in our last session, we emphasized the role stable marriages play in healthy families. And we also emphasized the importance that stability of the relationship of husband and wife, how that influences the confidence of your children. They have a need to know that you two love each other. And when they have that need fulfilled, when they have the confidence that you two love each other, then they're in a position to feel loved by you. They don't have to question your commitment to each other. They don't have to wonder whether or not you two are getting along. They don't have to strategize to try to pull the two of you together. They can get on with their life knowing that you two love each other. And this is a critical portion of a child's development. If a child has confidence in your love for each other, then from that comes the confidence and the emotional energy to give to others, to give to siblings, to give back love to you, eventually to give love to those outside of the family. Now, I want to qualify that statement briefly. I'm not implying that a particular feeling must first be present or be experienced before right behavior can be achieved, before a child is to do the things of love. But I am stating that the confidence love brings to a child advances relationships and advances moral training. It does not hinder it. And so that's why it's so important that your children have the absolute confidence that you two love each other, that you two are together. And through that, again, they will have the confidence of your love for them. Now, love is critically important to our Christian witness. In fact, in John 13:34 and John 13:35, Jesus said that it is our badge of identification. It is the very thing that separates us from all other groups. It's the very thing that separates subcultures and divisions among people. He said in John 13:34, "A new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another." And then in verse 35 he said this, "By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Now this is a very important passage speaking about love. When Jesus said, "This new commandment I give you," He was not saying, "I have never given before, God has never given before, the commandment to love." Certainly one of the great precepts of the law is, "Thou shalt love your neighbor as yourself." So it's not a new commandment to love. What He's saying is, love has never been used before as a badge of identification to identify a particular group. That's why in verse 35 He says, "By this," by what? "By the way you love one another, other people will know then, the world will know that you are my disciples." In fact, in the truest sense, in this one verse, Jesus gave the unbelieving world the right to judge whether or not we are Christians by the way we love one another. Because love is the badge. Love is what identifies us. And that's the new part of it. The new meaning, no badge like this has ever been used by any group before. This is now your mark of identification. So love is critically important in the Christian life. The mandate derived from these verses forces an explicit duty on Christians. And that duty is that we need to learn how to love one another. And may I add, we need to learn how to love one another practically. It's more than just simply saying, "I love you." It's more than just action void of feelings. It's vital to the emotional health of the family that each member knows how to practically say, "I love you" to the other members. Now, love is practical. There should be a cause and effect relationship. Love has two sides. There's the giving side of love, and there's the receiving side of love. One is the feeling side, one is the showing love, and one is the feeling side, the reciprocating side. And I want to state here that the action side and the feeling side of love complement one another. They should complement one another. Jesus was not emotionless. He loved in action and He loved with feelings. Both are true. We all recognize that one of the deepest emotional needs we have is the need to feel loved, the desire to feel loved. God made us rational and emotional creatures. That's part of our foundation. God gave us a capacity to feel love. Equally important, He gave us the ability to give love and show love to other people. Well, the question to be answered is this: how can I demonstrate love in action to my mate, to my children, in such a way that they actually feel love? They have the sensation of love. How can I show by my efforts, how can I demonstrate love towards you in such a way that you actually feel in your heart that sensation of being loved. Yes, I am loved. I feel that love. How can I say I love you in that way? Now, this concept that I'm going to share with you is not new. I was originally introduced to it by a pastor friend in co-labor and family ministries named Dr. Gary Chapman, who we do some traveling with. And in pursuing some of his thoughts, I came across a little book put out by InterVarsity Press by a man named Justin Swihart. And the book was appropriately titled, How to Say I Love You. Now, in this 91-page book, the author puts forth the general concepts that I'm going to share with you. I've adapted them for parenting and for you as young couples. So please listen carefully, because here's how it all works. The way you communicate love, the mode and manner of expressing love, is classified as an emotional language. It is a love language. Now let me give you a simple definition. I think you have a place to jot this down. A love language is the ability to express love and concern. A love language is the ability to express love and concern to another person in their primary emotional language. And that's the operative word, their primary emotional language. A love language is the ability to express love and concern to another person in their primary emotional language. Allow me to expand on my definition by this example. Not too long ago, I had opportunity to travel to the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union. And we had finished a series of lectures. We had a day to tour, and we found ourselves in Red Square. I was walking through Red Square, and I saw a crowd gathering in the center of Red Square. And I was curious, so I went over to the crowd to see what actions were taking place there. And I found myself standing in front of Lenin's tomb. As the crowd started to gather, I realized there was going to be the famous changing of the guards, as the guards would come down with their famous goose step, and it was quite a scene. And the crowd was gathering. Most people, I assume, were speaking Russian because it was sort of like a humming in my ear. I don't speak Russian. But I was just sort of standing there in the crowd, waiting for the guards to come down. They started coming down, and then all of a sudden, to my left, I hear these words. "Hey, Larry, come on over here. You can get a great shot." Immediately I turned. English! English! Here in Red Square, someone spoke English. My head tuned in right away. I listened. No one else turned, but I turned. You see, English is my primary language. I tuned into that language. Now, why didn't anyone else turn? Because it wasn't their primary language. We have been in Southern California long enough that when Spanish is being spoken, we understand Spanish. If Spanish was being spoken that day in Red Square, I would have understood it. I would have picked it up. Not as quickly, though, as English. It would have taken me a few moments to realize, oh, that's Spanish. French is my third strongest language, or my third weakest language. I don't remember a lot of French from my high school, my 2 years of high school, but I do remember a little bit of French, and I know when French is being spoken. If French was being spoken that day in Red Square, I would have picked it up. But not as quickly as Spanish, and certainly not as quickly as English. I was being pressed in by the crowd, and I accidentally bumped someone, and I just turned around and said, "Excuse me." It was such a natural thing for me to do. Well, the person behind me didn't speak English. The person behind me had no clue what I was saying. I could have been saying something crazy like, your mother drives a tank or something like that. The person did not understand. But I spoke my primary language. It was so natural for me to speak my primary language. The events of that afternoon provided a great analogy for what I'm going to present to you now. What happens with foreign languages occurs also with emotional languages. You see, we tend to speak our native tongue emotionally. To the people we're talking to, though, sometimes it comes across as a foreign language. We say, "I love you" in one language, but they hear it speak another language. It's a foreign language. As a result, our attempts to love are frustrated, and we are tempted to emotionally walk away from our children, walk away from our mates, thinking that no one cares. Now, to avoid that frustration, you need to first learn the 5 basic emotional languages of love. There are 5 of them. 5 ways of expressing love in action to our mates and to our children so that they actually feel loved in their hearts. Now, I'm going to list these 5 for you, and then I'm going to give you some examples of how they all work, how it all fits together. For you who are teachers in our midst, in this class, you can not only apply these principles to your own family, but you could apply them to your classroom. For you who may be nurses or other medical professionals, you could apply these as emotional care languages. We do seminars in hospitals working with nurses and emotional care languages. The principles still apply. Our examples will zero in on the family and on marriage, but the principles will still apply. The first love language, please jot this down. The first love language is encouraging words. Encouraging words. The Apostle Paul identifies the power of love when he told the Corinthians that love edifies in 1 Corinthians 8:1. That is, love builds up. That means love is communicated when we rightly build up other people through verbal encouragement, through words of encouragement. For example, simple words such as, "You look great tonight," or "I really appreciate the way you did that, thank you," or "That dress really compliments you," or my favorite, I love hearing it, "Have you been losing weight?" Words of encouragement. See, taking time to verbally pat someone on the back or building them up is a way of saying, "I love you." For some, there is no greater expression of love than hearing words of legitimate praise and recognition from those around. So, words of encouragement, encouraging words, that is the first way of communicating love emotionally in action. Number 2, please jot down acts of service. Acts of service. The Apostle John encouraged Christians to love in action through deeds and truth in 1 John 3:18. Through deeds and truth. 1 John 3:18. That is another way of communicating love through acts of service. Now, what is this? Acts of service is doing something for another person, something that's over and above the normal events of the day, something that you know the other person really is going to appreciate it, something that's very, very special. Maybe for the husband is putting gas in his wife's car on Sunday night so she doesn't have to worry about it all week long when she takes the children to school. Or finally fixing all the leaky faucets, or changing the water filter, or putting the shelves in the closet. We have at our home a jacaranda tree, and for those of you who live in the South understand and know how beautiful jacaranda trees can be. It is a beautiful tree, but the problem with our jacaranda tree, it's so big that this thing sheds 10 months out of the year. Something's always falling from that jacaranda tree. Now, I have a patio, and I have this patio fetish. I like to have a clean patio. So I sweep my patio every Saturday. It's sort of the ritual. Now, some Saturdays I cannot get to the patio. So I know on Monday when I come home from work, the first thing I'm going to do, because I can't sleep if it doesn't happen, I'm going to sweep that patio. Now, sometimes when I come home from work on Monday, Anne Marie would have gone out and she swept the patio. Now, of course, she appreciates a clean patio, too. But Anne Marie knows how much it means to me. She chose to love me through an act of service. She did something for me, something that she knew I would greatly appreciate it. That's acts of service. Love language number 3, please jot down, gift giving. Gift giving. Love language number 3, please jot down, gift giving. The greatest gift of love the world has ever known, of course, is Christ who gave himself to the church. Ephesians 5:25 tells us that. Gift giving is another way of saying, "I love you." It's really a simple gesture. It doesn't have to be something very expensive. But gift giving says this: when we were apart, you were on my mind. When we were separated, I was thinking about you. And now this little gift is just a token, a reminder of our separation, my thoughts for you, now that we are together. Gift giving is something very, very special. Again, it's a simple gesture, but it packs great meaning because of what it represents. It means that you were on my mind, and you continue to be on my mind. And because of that, here is this simple little gift. Something very basic. Gift giving is part of the love-marriage bond in every society. It doesn't matter if you're in a primitive society or if you're in a very complex culture such as ours. Gift giving is part of the love marriage bond all over the world because it represents something very, very basic. A way of saying, I love you. Now, love language number 4, please jot in quality time. Quality time. That's love language number 4. Now, what is this? Well, the gospel record provides insights to the quality time Jesus had with His Heavenly Father and also the quality time that He had with His disciples. He realized He needed quality time to bring about the discipleship relationship, to bring conformity to their thinking, unity to their lives. I think we could best define quality time in the marriage relationship by letting you know what it is not. Gentlemen, quality time is not sitting down watching television together. Quality time is not sitting down reading the newspaper together. Quality time goes far beyond that. Quality time goes far beyond the fact level of communication. That is, just communicating facts one to another. There was an accident on Route 5. I'm sorry I'm late. I did a load of laundry today. The ambulance came and it just tied everyone up. I ran out of detergent. Tomorrow I'm going to take another route home instead of coming up 5. Maybe before dinner I could get the detergent. These are two talking heads who are communicating facts like the 5 o'clock news. That's not quality time. Quality time is when you two participate together, that you get involved in each other's conversation, and your involvement comes from your heart, not just from your head. Quality time is actually giving. And I know some of you men have difficulty sitting 5 minutes. And some of you men have wives who have no difficulty sitting 5 minutes, but have the greatest yearning to know, would you just spend 5 or 10 minutes talking to me because that's all I need. See, spending quality time, and it may not be a large amount of time, but spending quality time routinely every day is a special way of saying, I love you. Now, men also, saying to your wife on Saturday morning, honey, I'm going to the lumberyard, you want to go for a ride? That is not quality time. But it may be love language number 5. So please write this in. Love language number 5, physical touch and closeness. Physical touch and closeness. This is love language number 5. I often wonder what it would have been like to have been the child in Mark 10, 13 through 16, who Jesus held and used for an example. Physical touch and closeness is another way of saying, I love you. It could start and be as basic as holding hands or an arm around the waist or an arm on a shoulder. It certainly can lead to the intimate act of marriage, but it doesn't always have to lead there. That is not the ultimate conclusion of physical touch and closeness. Sometimes I will be working in my garden, and Anne-Marie will come out with a book and a chair and sit in the shade and read that book. I feel loved when she does that, because she could have read the book anywhere in the house, but she chose to read that book near me. You see, physical touch and closeness. It means being close to each other, and certainly does include the touching and the gentle embrace, or just being near to each other. That is love language number 5. Okay? Now listen. Out of the 5 love languages I have just listed for you, words of encouragement, acts of service, gift giving, quality time, and physical touch and closeness. Out of those 5 love languages, one of them is your primary language. That is, one means more to you than the other 4. Now there's one on that list that means the least to you. But there's one that is your primary love language. And whatever your primary love language is, not only do you enjoy receiving it, but that's the one you most commonly speak to other people. That's the love language. Now let me put this all together by giving you some examples and seeing how all of this works. The first example we're going to draw from our experience. We had taught the love languages to a couples retreat, and going back to our cottages, a couple stopped us and said, the lights just turned on for us. You see, it turned out that the husband's primary love language was physical touch and closeness. That's what meant most to him, physical touch and closeness. Number 5 on his list was words of encouragement. It really didn't matter if you said, hey, nice job, or thank you. He knew you appreciated it. He didn't need words. Guess what was number 1 for her? Words of encouragement. And guess what was number 5? Yeah, physical touch and closeness. You see, here's a good Christian couple, supposedly they have a good Christian marriage, but do you realize they kept missing each other? He would say, honey, how about a hug? She would say, write me a letter. She wanted words of encouragement because she felt loved with that. She's the one who went around the house and would leave little notes and little notes in his briefcase. She's the one who would call just to see how he was during the day because the words of encouragement, expressing love through verbally, meant something to her. He's the one who would want to give her a hug or maybe, hey, let me just rub your back or massage your shoulder. No, you don't have to touch her. Because he communicated through physical touch and closeness. Now, once they understood the concept of love languages, once they understood that you have to, as a mate, speak your spouse's love language, their cup, that sense of love that was flowing over when you first got married, that sort of came down because you have a little leak in it, that cup started to fill up again and flow over. Because all of a sudden there is this new sensation of love. He used to come home from work and she would work diligently in the rose garden. He would come in the door realizing how much she worked, but then come in and say, what's for dinner, honey? I'm home. She did all that work to get, hopefully to hear, something such as, I appreciate all that you did in the garden today. Once he learned the love languages, he chose to love his wife. She chose to love her husband. He now leaves the little notes around. He makes sure that he calls her during the day because he knows this means love to her. When they're in a social, she now comes, stands by his side, gives him a big smile, takes his hand, and just stands there. Because she knows when I do this, my husband feels loved by me. I'm choosing to love him. And you know, folks, when that happens, all of a sudden the sensation of love is even greater because I realize it's not your primary language. You're choosing to come to my primary language. Let me give you another scenario, please. This is a popular one. Let's say the husband's primary love language is acts of service. This is the doing man. And her primary love language is quality time. Here's how the scenario unfolds. They come through the door. He comes through the door at night. They greet, they embrace, they hug, and she says, honey, how about if I make some coffee and we could take some time and sit down and I'll tell you who called and you could tell me about your day? And he says, well, that's just fine. Why don't you make the coffee and I'll just change my clothes and get into work clothes for after dinner. So she goes off as a dutiful wife, goes into the kitchen, prepares everything. She has it all set out. He's in the bedroom, supposedly changing his clothes. And she says, honey, are you coming? And from the bedroom, she hears, I'll be right there, sweetie. There's some laundry in the bed. I'm just putting it away. I'll be right out. He's such a wonderful husband. A few moments goes by, and she says, hon, coffee's getting cold. Are you coming? I'm coming, dear. I was hanging up my tie, but the light bulb burnt out. I'm going to change it now so you don't stub your toe tonight. This man is just great. So a few minutes goes by, and he's dashing through into the kitchen. She says, oh, you coming now? I'll be right there, sweetie. I was throwing the light bulb away, but the garbage is still. Let me take care of it right now so we don't have to worry about it before dinner. And out to the garage she goes. Finally, she's frustrated. She gets up. She goes towards the garage. Honey, you said you're going to sit with me. Are you coming? And you hear in this echo chamber, because he's got his head now in the dryer, dryer, stop, sweetie. The laundry basket's right here. I'm going to bring it in, and I'll be right there. I mean, this guy can't stop. Finally, they get over to the couch, and he says, so, what do you want to talk about? She says, nothing. Well, I want to say something. I just don't feel sometimes you love me. He said, how can you say that? After all I do for you? I mean, I put the laundry away, and I change the light bulb, and I take the garbage out and bring the laundry. Do you know how many wives would love to have a husband like me? And you say I don't love you? I don't know. I just don't feel. Problem? The problem is, neither one understood the other's primary love language. He spoke his primary acts of service, and that's how he communicated love, and that's a wonderful thing. And she was speaking her primary quality time. You see, but the problem is, not knowing each other's primary love language, they never had opportunity to choose to love each other and to bring that sensation. You know, if you have a wife or a husband whose primary love language is quality time, literally 10 minutes a day can fill their emotional love tank to overflowing. 10 minutes a day. And acts of service. It's just some of the most basic things that we do for each other. Don't get up. Let me get you a cup of coffee. You've worked hard all day. Let me do that for you, honey. It's just something very, very basic. It's a way of saying I love you. Let me give you a third scenario, be a little more vulnerable now that we know each other a little bit more after these weeks. I'm going to talk about our family. It happens that Anne Marie's primary love language is physical touch and closeness. Now, according to our girls, that's not so good for them, but that's good for me, because it also happens, and it's very rare, very, very rare, that my primary love language is physical touch and closeness. See, that's real good for us. But according to Jennifer, our youngest daughter, she says, this love language thing is completely unfair for me. We said, well, why are you saying that? She said, well, you two, you have physical touch and closeness, and you chase each other around the house like jackrabbits all day. You got Amy, hers is quality time. She's sitting on a couch waiting for me to come over and spend time with her. Mine's gift giving. I'm out buying everyone gifts, and I'm not going to get anything out of this. You know what is critically important, though, for you parents is to learn and learn early your children's primary love language. What is it that they speak, and what is it that they need? And they also have to be encouraged to learn yours and speak yours. I enjoy it, even to this day, now that our children are grown and they're married, and one's a mother herself, and the other one soon will be one, I hope. But when we're together, when I hear from them, Dad, don't go out the house. I've got to give you your hug first. They are choosing to love me, knowing that's Daddy's primary. I've got to give you your hug first. And Jennifer's gift giving. It doesn't have to be a big thing. I could come home with a pack of Tic Tacs or something like that. So, Jen, I was in the store and I got these for you. Dad, thank you. And she's excited. She gives me a great big kiss. Her eyes light up. Why? Was it because of the 35 cents or the 40 cents? No. It's because, Jenny, when we were apart, you were on my mind. And this is just a token of that memory. And now that we're together, I'm just saying I love you. See, that's gift giving. And she would do the same for us. I mean, many nights we would walk in the house and we would smell something from the kitchen and be something baking, and she said, I baked you a special treat. I baked you a pie or whatever it would have been. I baked you a cake. Or she loved to do something special, to give herself, to give gifts. And quality time for Amy. She got quality time during the week, but sometimes we would make an appointment and she would come to my office, we would go out for a long, leisurely lunch, maybe for 2-3 hours, and just sit and talk. She knew her daddy, who does not like to sit very long, she knew her daddy was speaking her primary love language. She was sitting there, and we were talking back and forth, and we had this time, and I was saying, Amy, I love you in your primary. I was choosing to love her in her primary. Now, another reason to know your child's primary love language and understand their love language ranking is because often parents will misdiagnose a behavior or misdiagnose an attitude. And this is true in school. Teachers will misdiagnose. Or nurses will misdiagnose a patient's, the signals a patient's sending in terms of their emotions. When we traveled, and the girls were still home, we would, of course, try to be dutiful parents and bring them a gift. And so when we walked through the door after a weekend conference or something and come in on Sunday night, we would hand our gifts over to the girls. And maybe it was a teddy bear, and we'd say, Jenny, Mom and Dad got you this teddy bear, and how do you like it? And Jennifer's face would light up. Oh, Mommy, Daddy, this is wonderful. Oh, this teddy bear, I can't wait to put this with all my other little teddy bears. And she would hug us and kiss us. And Anne-Marie and I would whisper, now there is one thankful little girl. And then we'd say, Amy, here's the teddy bear. Mommy and Daddy got this on the trip. Now Amy's gift giving is number 5 for her. So Christmas is real exciting around her house now. And because her number 1 was quality time. So we would give Amy, here's the teddy bear. And Amy would say, well, that's nice. Can I talk? Well, come on, Amy, don't you want to play with this teddy bear? Look at these cute little ears. Well, it really is cute. Maybe a little later we could talk. And as we dialogued a little bit more, we would then misdiagnose and say, I don't think Amy is as thankful as Jennifer. I mean, look at Jennifer. She's still over there in the corner, glowing from this gift. And Amy, she's already put it down, and wrong diagnosis. Because Amy was just as thankful as Jennifer. And you see, we do that as parents. We misdiagnose motivation. We misread behavior. Amy was just as thankful as Jennifer. What we happened to do is hit Jenny's primary love language. And it was number 5 for Amy. She was very appreciative. But what Amy was saying to us, because of her primary love language, is, Mommy and Daddy, would you just sit down in 5 minutes? Because you've been gone all weekend and there's so much to tell you. And once we learned that, then we wanted to make sure on a regular basis that we gave her a good shot at quality time. Just like we realized that Jenny needed these little tokens, these little gifts, because it meant so much to her. It is so critical that we learn each other's primary love language. It's so critical that we learn our children's primary love language. You've all experienced this before. You've been married for a while. There was a weekend away. Maybe it was a wedding. Grandma had the children and you had to drive someplace. And it was just one of those weekends when everything clicked. Maybe it was just because you broke the routine. But everything clicked. You talked. Your talk was more than just facts. You were talking emotionally. You had a wonderful time. And it was a great weekend. And then you come back from the weekend and you pick up your children on Sunday night. And on Monday morning, you're wondering, where's all that magic now? Where is that filling sense of love? And where is the feeling of love now? The likelihood is on that weekend, when everything seemed to click, the likelihood is that you two were speaking each other's primary love language and you just never knew it. You just never knew it. That's why it's critical for you guys to choose how to love. You make that decision. As we're going to talk about a little bit from now, every day you choose to love and every day you choose not to love. Choosing to love is choosing to love in action so that the person who's receiving it will have the sensation of love, have the feeling of love. All of the love languages, and you're going to be listing these in just a few moments, and you're going to be taking a little test and an exercise, self-evaluation, then a couple evaluations. They're all ranked. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What is interesting is that when you were courting, when you were engaged, when everything was perfect, you didn't have a mortgage payment or insurance payment, Mom and Dad were still paying for everything. That is the only time in your relationship when you spoke all 5 love languages in a perfect horizontal balance. That's the way you guys were. Quality time, for example. You used to look and say, oh, it's 2 a.m., it's still early, do you want to talk more? Now look at you, 9 o'clock, got to go to bed, honey, I'm bushed. I mean, that's it. The 2 children have run you down. Physical touch and closeness, there was a time when the 2 of you would drive down the street in a car and it looked like there's only one person because you're so close. And words of encouragement, you used to verbally slobber over each other. You look so nice today. Well, you look nice too. I mean, you didn't know what to say. I love your hair. I love your socks. You had quality time, and you had words of encouragement and physical touch, and you used to try to outdo each other. As soon as you got married, it moved from a horizontal balance right into a vertical. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's where it is right now tonight. You have a primary, and you have one that's least, and then you have 3 that are in between. You see. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to help you identify all 5 of these love languages. Let me give you some final thoughts before we move on to that. And these are just summary thoughts. They're going to give them to you as bullets, really. Number 1, your primary language works 2 ways. You speak it more than the other languages, and you feel most loved when it's spoken to you. That's the first principle. It's 2 ways. Not only do you enjoy it when it's being spoken to you, but that's the one you primarily speak. The second summary point is this. You have the ability to speak all 5 languages, and you should speak all 5. You have the ability to speak all 5, and you should speak all 5 of these love languages. Number 3, love languages in children begin to emerge right around the age of 7 years old. 7 years old. It's rather difficult to distinguish what is a primary and what is not with a child under 7 because every child loves physical touch and closeness. Every child loves gifts. Every child loves quality time. You see, they love them all. So the love languages in children, if you have a child around 7, it begins to emerge. They start speaking that one primary more than anything else. Number 4, we believe the arrangement and order of your love languages is God-given and not something learned. It's God-given and not something learned. Although their position will never change, they can be positively or negatively influenced by your upbringing. Certainly that could happen. But whatever you were given, whatever is your primary, that's what you were born with, that's what you stay. That primary may be a very excitable one for you, or it may be one that, it's been abused my whole life and it doesn't mean anything to me, such as words of encouragement. If you had a dad whose words of encouragement were very empty, I love you in the morning, I love you at night, and that's all you ever heard from the man, and there was no meat to his behavior, no meat to your relationship, then words would be very, very empty. And so you then enter into a marriage and your husband says, I love you, honey, and then you think back, well, does he really love me? And you may have expectations that you shouldn't have. Or maybe you underestimate his generosity of love, or you underestimate how much he really does love you. And then number 5, most important, as I said earlier, every day you choose to love and every day you choose not to love. This really becomes the bottom line. We are instructed to love as Christ loved. We're instructed in Philippians 2 to let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. Well, what mind was in Christ Jesus? It was the mind that chose to love us in a very special way. It was the mind that when He chose to leave the splendor of heaven to come down to die for us, to take up and become a servant. And from that servanthood, He went to a death on the cross. Choosing to love. And sometimes choosing to love when the other person is not very attractive. Let me bring it all together with this one last analogy. We've all experienced this, men. I've had days at work when nothing has gone right. Nothing has gone the way you planned it. Everything has gone wrong. If it could go wrong, Murphy's Law set in, it went wrong. And we've all experienced that days, and I think you ladies have experienced it too, but I'm speaking from the men, from a male perspective, from male experience. I had one of those days a couple of years ago. And I went home, and everything is just, nothing is right. You walk in the door, and Anne-Marie and Jennifer, they know when I'm coming like this to get out of the way. So they must have seen me coming because they weren't around. And I go in the house, and you guys know what it's like. You pick up the newspaper, no, I don't want to read. You get the TV thing, and turn it off, I don't want to. You open up the refrigerator, you're going to eat something, no, I don't want to eat. It's just that you don't know what to do. And you have UMS, this ugly mood syndrome. And I walked through our kitchen, I went into our garage, and in our garage we have an area where we do some work, and Amy's in the garage. And Amy has this book in her hand, and she turns around, not knowing what was coming, the beast that was in the room. She turns around and says, "Hi, Dad." Now we have some boxes up on some shelves that we use for some shipping, and we have some shelves that are reserved, no boxes. Well, there were boxes on that shelf. Now, you guys know what I mean. Amy, I didn't even respond to it. Amy, why are the boxes on these shelves? Now, you know no boxes are supposed to be up on these shelves. And look at this floor. Amy, you got those styrofoam crazy eights. They're squashed. They're everywhere. They're blowing everywhere. Look at this floor. Okay. Where's my hammer? Where's my hammer? Now, I bought you girls each a hammer. Where's my hammer? My hammer's not where it's supposed to be. Who took my hammer? You tracking with me, men? You know those days. Amy at that point had the right to say, "Dad, I think you need to take a nap and wake up in 2 weeks." But she didn't. You know what she did? She put her book down. She came over to me with her arms open. She put her arms around me and said, "Daddy, you must have had a terrible day." And she just patted me. And she just held me. You know what was significant about that? In the moment that I was least lovely, she loved me. In a moment when I never deserved to have that type of love shown to me because of my shortness, because of the way I attacked, she chose to love me regardless of myself. And that's exactly what we need to be doing in our families. That's exactly what the Christian needs to be doing in their marriages. That's exactly what you need to be doing with your children. I'm not saying compromise behavior, but what I am saying is when your mate or when your children are in that frame of mind, or when their actions communicate anything but love, maybe that's exactly what you need to do whatever their primary love language is, and Amy knew mine, then communicate that primary language to them. You see, we want you to learn to love your children with a biblical love, because a biblical love not only fills the child with the confidence of your love, ultimately it fosters love for other people. You see, that's how we encourage the otherness, which is the foundation of biblical ethics. A biblical love does not look inward. Biblical love looks outward. When biblical love is in the life of a child, that child is not held back by the shackles of self-love, self-interest, self-protection. When love is rightly expressed in the context of the family, it makes it easier for each member to say, I love you, right back to those in the family and then to those outside the family. When we love with a biblical love, we rightly represent God to the world. See, and that's the bottom line for us. We rightly represent God to the world. Right now, I'm going to have you do a simple little exercise. I'm going to give you some instructions. Then I'm going to release you to that exercise, and then we're going to go to our wrap-up session. And let me just review. This is what I want you to do for me. Pay close attention, and don't write anything until you get all the instructions. But here it is. You have in front of you an exercise, and you have some columns that have numbers 1 through 5. Here's what I want you to do. In the first column, on the left-hand side, as you look at your page, in the first column, I want you privately, don't confer with your wife or with your husband. I don't even want them looking to see what you're doing. I want you to list what you believe is your mate's listing, ranking. Your mate's primary, then number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. Write down my husband's primary is, and his number 2, 3, 4, and 5, or my wife's is. That's what you're going to do on the column on the left. Then, without any conversation, on the column on the right, I want you to list yours. Rank it according to what you believe is your primary love language. That's number 1. And then number 2, 3, 4, and 5. So on the column on the left, you're going to do your mates, your spouses. On the column on the right, you are going to do your own. When you're done with that, then I want the two of you to compare. Now, if you're a single parent, what you're going to do is you're going to write that list and then maybe include what you believe to be your child. Or maybe it's your mom or your dad's or a brother or sister. But for the most of you who are together here in this class, who are joining us, for most of you, it's going to be a husband and wife. That's what you're going to start with. And then in the wrap-up session, we're going to add some more information to that. How to say I love you. This is so foundational. This can change life. You got problems with teenagers? It could be something as simple as never having communicated to them in their primary language, I love you. You may have loved them. You may have done your best to love them, to demonstrate love, but maybe it's never been in their primary. This can change everything around. For the worst marriage, this can change everything around, but the bottom line is you have to choose to do it. Okay? Let's take a few moments and let's go to your exercise.
Well, hopefully you finished your little assignment that Gary gave you, and if nothing else, it's generated some interesting conversation, and we'll certainly give you something to talk about during your couch time this week. Well, Eric and Julie, what were some of your first thoughts when you heard love languages?
Well, I realized that now Julie was fully equipped to show me love in an unsacrificial way. But now then I realized, too, that what Gary had taught, that we need to choose to show love. And sometimes it's difficult to put aside self and look at the preciousness of others.
You learned that way. How about your children? What would be Brittany's primary love language?
It's quality time.
Really?
And it's real evident when Brittany's had quality time spent with her. She just sort of feels all loved up, and it affects her in other areas of her life also when she has felt loved. And the trust factor she has with mom and dad, she's willing to sort of go the extra mile with you because of the time and the effort that has been spent with her. She realizes that.
It is interesting once you recognize what your child's love language is to see the effect that it has on them. I know as you were sharing about Amy's, it's also quality time. whether that's particular to firstborns or not, we're not quite sure. But for her, if Gary had brought her home Tic Tacs, I mean, gift giving is Jenny's number one. Her face lights up. Amy's response to Gary would be, do I have bad breath? You know, it is just so obvious, really. And for those of you with older children, it will be much clearer. And your youngest one, it's probably not quite as
It isn't
clear
as
yet.
clear on Brooke yet. She has a tendency to have things kind of meshed together, so we can't really discern which one is her primary love language.
Well, you have that difference though in the packaging. You have those who have a very clear distinction between number 1, number 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then you have a person whose love language package is very squashed together. They really do love them all. And maybe Brooke is going to be that way. My thought on this, as just hearing you guys talk, and going back to even with Brittany and with Amy, almost a sense of sadness, of something missing, how close we could have come to not have filled her heart with love. How easily it would have been to more or less parent hit or miss on this love thing. There seems to be a sense of security, I guess that's what I'm saying. Now that you know her primary, it doesn't mean we're not going to speak the other 4 to her, but we're going to purpose in our hearts that this child, or this wife, this husband, this man, that I'm going to choose to love them in that primary. It means so much to them.
And I know for one of our sons who is very verbal, his love language is physical touch and closeness, and it is very evident toward the evening hours when Blake has not had his fill of physical touch and closeness. He'll comment, where has it been all day, Mom? I didn't get enough kisses. And he will be very verbal about what he has lacked in the day. And like you said, there's a sadness that kind of comes over. He doesn't feel that, security that speaking their primary love language to them gives them.
And one thing we have to continue to remember is that, figuratively speaking, our hearts have a hole in it. And so we have to continue to love those around us, those intimate relationships as a husband, wife, as our children. Thinking of Brittany, for example, just because she has her heart filled now, today, does not mean that that heart's going to be filled tomorrow. And so it's our duty as parents, our duty as mates, to continue to say, I love you, in the love language of the other person.
It's not enough to just find out your mate's or your children's love language. You have to choose to love. I know for a couple in our class, they had found out each other's love language and found out they were completely the opposite. And all they said was, well, that explains it. They didn't choose at that point that they're going to do something about this. They're going to make the first step in loving each other a little more.
And we see that in teenagers too. Parents of teens.
And maybe just a word of caution, too, for those of you that do have the older children, the teenagers. You as a mom and dad, obviously you want to discuss what you think your children's love languages are, but don't lock your teens into what you think they are. Listen to what they have to say. And
we experienced that.
Right, we had a counseling session, and the parents were absolutely sure that they knew what their child's love language was, and they wanted to go run right out and speak it in this particular manner. And after we counseled with the team, it was completely different. They felt it was gift giving. It was very obvious that this child wanted some quality time. So it's something that we need to be careful of as parents and working with our children and our mates, for that matter, also. And I think another thing, Julie, too, you were talking about the issue of choice, which ties back to our Greek and Hebrew mind. The Greek, tonight, you learned some information. Now the Hebrew application is, what are you going to do with it? Well, hopefully this has been a fun evening, plus an enlightening evening for you. You will have an assignment to go home and jot this down, put it up on the refrigerator, and begin to apply what you've learned tonight. Well, this is a good place to wrap up, and hopefully this has been an enlightening evening for you, and we'll look forward to you joining us next week as Gary shares about the Father's mandate.